Hi, this is Jay Rosen, and this is my friend Sauvignon Blanc. And tonight, in the fifth of my late night with PressThink videos, I'm going to talk about um, the influence of a particular writer and thinker on what I do and how I think. And her name is Hannah Arendt. When I was in graduate school, I took a course in psychology, and on the last day of the course, the instructor said that there had been a secret book in the class, which he didn't put on the reading list, but this book had informed everything that he had done and said and tried to teach us during the term. So this is sort of the way I think of Arendt. She's the secret author behind almost everything that I have done as a writer and critic and teacher. Although I don't talk very much about her, hardly ever makes an appearance in my work. So tonight I'm going to explain why she has been so important to me and what I think she contributes to critics' work on democracy in the press, and new media. The first thing about Arendt is that she's, a little bit about her first. She's one of our outstanding students of the 20th century. She is a political philosopher. She wrote about totalitarianism. That was her biggest preoccupation. She was a refugee from Nazi Germany who was very lucky to escape from Europe and settle in the United States. And she came to prominence in the 1950s and 60s in New York among a coterie of New York intellectuals gathered around journals like Partisan Review and the New York Review of Books. Her most famous work is The Origins of Totalitarianism and another called The Human Condition. And there's a cult of Arendt around the world. There's many people in many countries who see her as a shining star in the intellectual sky, and there are many different reasons for that. I read most of her works in graduate school, and I was changed by them. So that's what I want to explain to you. First, Arendt is probably our outstanding philosopher of the public realm. That is what she called it. And to her, the public realm was not just the public square, as in a marketplace or a marketplace of ideas. And the public realm wasn't simply politics and elections where we decide on who has power. First and last, the public realm was a space where people could distinguish themselves and create something or say something to us, as in a speech, that would outlast the moment and shine down through the years, through the ages. So the Gettysburg Address would be an example of an outstanding use of the public realm, because those are great words that have shined down through the centuries. And this notion of the public realm as a place where people shine and distinguish themselves in memory and try to create something that lasts or do something that people uh, will recall is unique. So most people have a much more utilitarian view of what the public realm is for. Arendt was also very strong on distinguishing between the public and the private realm. And in her view, you couldn't have a strong public realm unless the border with the private was kept fairly religiously. The imagery she used was akin to a spotlight on stage. It works because of the darkness surrounding it. The people appear in public when they are able to rise from the obscurity and privacy of the private realm into the light of the public. And so you can't have a public space without a respect for private life. And um, she saw these two terms as interdependent. You couldn't preserve one without preserving the other, which I think is a very valuable idea. One of the things Arendt did that I have adopted in some of my own writing is that she would take two terms that are very close to one another, sometimes used interchangeably, and say that actually they mean two different things. And by taking two words that ordinarily sound similar and saying, actually, these two things are different, she opens up new intellectual space. So she distinguished, for example, between work and labor. And I can think of an example in my writing. I've written on several occasions that in my Twitter feed I try for a Twitter feed that is 100% personal and 0% private, which means to me that I want what I say on Twitter to reflect what I think and to come from inside my obsessions and interests, and for it to have my style, my voice in it. In that sense, personal. But I also try to make it 0% private, meaning I don't tell you where I am, I don't tell you what I ate, I don't talk about my family, I don't talk about my private life, I don't burden you with information about my health or the state of my fatigue on a given day. And while some might equate the personal and the private, to me these are very different things, and that's a habit of mine that I learned from Arendt. One of the most disturbing and profound concepts Arendt develops in her work is the notion of worldlessness. Worldlessness. And on first glance, this doesn't make any sense at all. How can people be without a world? But what she means by worldlessness is that people can lose the sense of living in a common world that that stands between people. And when we no longer know or have this strong sense that we share the world with other people, that's worldlessness. And she sometimes described it as if people sitting around a table who have a way to relate to one another and also separate from one another, which is what's great about sitting around a table, suddenly saw the table vanish, so that they were no longer connected to each other, but also not materially separated from each other so that there was enough space between them either. And worldlessness is losing a sense of membership and ownership over the common world, the public world. And her view was that this is what had happened in Europe, in Germany. But a lot of people had lost the sense that they could participate, that they could influence events, that they could shape the hand of power. And they had lost this sense of common ownership of the state of their society. And it was that wordlessness that prepared the way for Hitler, which of course was the defining and shattering event of her life, and the event that she spent her entire life trying to understand. You have to remember that for intellectuals of the 20th century, the biggest, number one problem was, how could we explain that Nazi Germany and the Holocaust and totalitarianism arose from the most civilized society in Western Europe? And this is a very hard thing to explain. Another notion she developed to explain it was to argue that the Jews of Germany had lost the capacity to think politically, which is a point that made a huge impression on me. What she meant by that was that they thought of themselves as Germans, as good Germans. They had, for the most part, assimilated into a modern and cosmopolitan society. And when the Nazi Party first arose and when Hitler began making his noises, they didn't see the situation clearly because they had lost the capacity to think politically. And in this case, what it means is that it didn't matter what the Jews of Germany thought about themselves or how they defined themselves. What mattered was that Hitler had come to power by demonizing the Jews. And a dynamic had been unleashed in Germany where the Germans were being encouraged to see the Jews as this foreign element, this kind of poison that had to be eliminated from their society. And if you could see that, if you could understand that, it didn't matter what you thought. What mattered was the strength of that dynamic, and it impressed Arendt in the negative sense that many of the Jews that lost their lives in Germany were unable to identify this political dynamic. And the reason this made such a big impression on me is that it taught me that if people fail to grasp what's happening around them, if they fail to get involved in politics, pay attention to it, understand it, they can not only lose an election, not only lose their illusions, they could actually lose their life. Another one of the distinctions that Arendt made was between behavior and action. Behavior is what large numbers of people tend to do, as in the laws of behavior or behaviorism. And action is when people break out of routines and break out of what's expected of them and create something unexpected and new, something that hasn't been seen before. And the reason we have the public realm and freedom is so people can take action and do the unexpected. And this also affected me a great deal. Finally, one of her key concepts is the notion of natality, the opposite of mortality. Natality is this wonderful thing about the human condition, which is that we can start something new, like the United States of America. We can think of something that hasn't been thought of before and bring it into the world. So those are some of the lessons I took from Hannah Arendt, some of the inspirations she's given me. She's the secret book. This is Jay Rosen. Good night.